Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're going to dive into a pretty provocative argument about communication from Joseph Nimes' book, Bambina or Subpoena. It really challenges some common assumptions about how you're supposed to share a world-changing message. So let's get right into the author's core idea. So, the author frames his entire argument around this high-stakes thought experiment. Just imagine it. It doesn't matter where you are. The Oval Office, a pepper farm in Cambodia, ancient Samaria, the clock is ticking. You've got 15 seconds. What is the one message that can cut through all of that? And to really drive home this sense of urgency, he contrasts it with something he sees as a very common modern approach. He paints this picture of a mission trip in a rickety old minivan, just packed with goodie bags and simplified stories. And it immediately makes you ask the question, does this really gentle method actually match the high-stakes nature of the message? And this leads us to the author's central idea. He argues that there are two fundamentally different ways to present a message, and he gives them these two really powerful, contrasting names, the Bambina and the Subpoena. And this slide just illustrates that contrast so vividly. On one side, you have the Bambina approach, right? It's presented as this gentle, really appealing invitation. But on the other side, you've got the Subpoena, an official, unavoidable legal summons. One feels like a friendly letter, the other feels like a notice to appear in court. So here's the Bambina in action. According to the author, this is a classic example. It's common in modern evangelism, and it leads with a message that's designed to be warm, non-threatening, inviting, and just really reassuring. And then, in stark contrast, you've got the Subpoena. It's direct, it's unadorned, it's a really urgent warning. There is no soft opening here, it just gets straight to the point, with a message of impending judgment that absolutely demands a response. Now, the author argues that this subpoena style is actually the original intended message for people who are totally unfamiliar with the topic, and he gives this very specific structured message a name that he pulls from its core components. He calls it the water gospel. And why water? Well, the name comes from this recurring emphasis on God as the creator who provides life-sustaining water, a universal element that, connects all of humanity. Now, this isn't an idea he's just pulled out of thin air. He actually builds his case by analyzing three key encounters in the New Testament. And in each case, he points out that the message being delivered to a non-Jewish, unbelieving audience follows a very specific pattern, one that's pretty different from messages given to people who already know the background story. So what is this structure? Well, according to the author, the water gospel consistently follows this really clear four-part sequence. It kicks off with a concept everyone can grasp, a creator. Then it moves to a stark warning about judgment. Then it offers the resurrection as proof, and it finishes with a direct command. So here's the crucial point. The author frames the water gospel as something official, something you can't avoid. It's not an offer you can just think about later. It's a summons to a cosmic court that requires an immediate plea. Okay, so this brings up a huge question, right? If the Subpoena was the original message, why is the Bambina so common today? Well, the author traces this historical shift in communication strategy that happened over several centuries. This timeline basically lays out the author's argument for how that shift happened. He suggests that what started as a direct proclamation about creation and judgment, well, it slowly evolved, influenced by some key figures, and eventually by the principles of modern marketing. The author really flags this influential instruction from missions pioneer Count Zinzendorf as a key turning point. See how the focus narrowed? It simplified the message down to its most Christ-centric elements, which the author argues was a real departure from that initial water gospel sequence. And this simplified message, while probably well-intentioned, was also a lot more marketable. The author contends that this is what paved the way for modern communication techniques to shape the message into that more palatable, Bambino Macadama form that we see so often today. And this brings us to the author's final, really powerful comparison. When you put the two approaches side by side, his entire thesis becomes crystal clear. And wow, right here, the difference is just undeniable. It's different in content, and it's different in order. The biblical sequence, as the author presents it, it starts with creation and judgment. The modern presentation, it often starts with God's love and a wonderful plan. The starting points are almost polar opposites. This slide really highlights that for the author, this isn't just about the content. It's about the intended emotional and spiritual journey. He argues that the biblical pattern moves from a stark proclamation that leads to fear,
while the modern pattern moves from an assurance of love that leads to faith. Two very different paths.
So, the crucial point the author is making is that you can't just rearrange the components without fundamentally changing the message itself. He argues the sequence is part of the message, and it was designed to produce a very specific response that starts not with assurance, but with a sober understanding of judgment.
And he leaves us with this final, challenging question. It brings everything full circle, right back to the beginning. And it forces us to consider what kind of message we carry. Is it a sweet, easy-to-digest Bambina, or is it the urgent, demanding subpoena of the water gospel? Which one, he asks, is in our van?